The skull that Sedo had summoned opened its mouth and began to emit an intense light. With eyes shining with rage, Jing began to observe it and with a serious expression used the flashing lightning, causing his body to transform into electricity. Then, Jing summoned the ancestral tree and decided to let it take care of the curse. The ancestral tree appeared and began to emit an intense energy which started to spread throughout the area. Upon seeing the ancestral tree, Sedo's eyes filled with rage. He could not help but clench his teeth tightly and feel confused upon noticing that his supreme technique had been easily dodged by Jing. Controlling the insects, Little Nine managed to defeat Kaido. His body was lying on the ground and the insects were devouring him. With a joyful gaze, she informed Jing that she had defeated Kaido. Our boy could not help but praise her. Jing extended his hand and decided to use the spear of the god of the underworld and gave Zeojia the order to capture Sedo's soul. Little Zeojia transformed into a spear and while his eyes were shining with evil, he shot towards Sedo. Zeojia tried to attack, but Sedo reacted in time and moving to one side, dodged the attack. His attention was fixed on Jing and his eyes began to shine with fury and confusion. He could not believe that Jing could accurately locate his current position. He was in shock since his concealment technique was top level in the world and there was no way anyone could surpass him. While with one hand Jing was controlling the spear, he extended the other and thunder began to emerge from it. With a murderous gaze, he gave Little Nine the order to release the insects. She obeyed and a horde of insects began charging towards Sedo. A crowd of warriors arrived at the outside of the barrier. Upon noticing that Jing had not yet come out, some thought he was dead. According to them, he seemed dumb and different from what people said. Others thought that Jing was not dead since he had the 9 miasma wings and could still turn this situation around. The opponent had prepared an ambush in advance, so it was safe to say they had taken all factors into consideration and were well prepared. With a serious expression, Wuji began to observe the barrier and mentioned that even if all of them entered, there would be no guarantee of coming out victorious, much less would Jing do it. Who was a warrior with 3 transformations. According to him, Jing was a talented but brainless boy and on the battlefield of the caverns he could kill countless soldiers. But if he went with them to challenge the 3 foreign islands, he would only be a burden. He began to walk away from the area and made it clear that it was somewhat disappointing that God Jing Wu had placed his hopes in someone like Jing. He gave everyone the order to follow him since this boy wasn't worth it. The warriors nodded their heads. Ding Chenkyu began to observe the barrier, and felt sad he did not want to leave Jing alone. Just before they could take another step, the barrier broke into pieces. Everyone turned around and their attention was fixed on it, making their eyes widen in surprise. The explosion created a curtain of smoke and someone with eyes shining with evil emerged and began to stare at them. Upon feeling this, they quickly realized that this aura belonged to an awakened one of 8 transformations. With a serious expression, Wuji drew his sword and gave the order for everyone to prepare for battle. Ding Chenkyu also drew his sword, while on the other side. With a furious gaze, Nan Gongyin used her power and began gathering energy in her hands. Once the smoke screen disappeared, Kaido could be seen on his knees on the ground and in front of him stood Jiang Chen. Ding Chenkyu's attention was fixed on our boy and his eyes widened in surprise, leaving him in shock. He couldn't believe that Jing had defeated everyone alone. Nan Gongin's eyes widened with surprise and confusion. She didn't know what was happening. A minute ago inside the barrier, while the thunder and insects were approaching, with a mind full of fear, Kaido fell to his knees on the ground, extended his hands and asked Jing to wait a moment. He surrendered and apologized. Jing began walking toward him and with a smile mentioned that this was a traditional skill. He made it clear that if Kaido was trying to play dirty, he would die, but if he wanted to save himself, surrendering and apologizing wasn't enough. With a confused expression, Kaido asked what he should do then. while Jing's eyes were shining with joy. He took out a scroll and with a confident smile revealed that this item was the soul contract scroll. Kaido had to sign it to become his servant and in this way could be saved from death. Kaido began to doubt since a warrior could be killed but not humiliated. While Jing's body was surrounded by mist, with a smile he promised that if Kaido became his servant he could help him break his limits and ascend to the 9 transformations. Kaido was confused. Jing extended his hand and with a confident gaze used his power and summoned the Void Stone. Kaido's attention fixed on it and it didn't take long for him to realize that the key for those awakened of Great Seer to awaken was the Tao. A door began to open in front of Kaido and from it started emerging a golden light. Kaido extended his hands toward the door, not knowing if this was the door that allowed warriors to cross into the realm of 9 transformations. Jing approached him and with a penetrating gaze placed his hand on his shoulder. The door to the realm closed, causing Kaido's eyes to fill with despair. With a curious gaze, Jing noticed that Kaido was desperate to become strong. He asked if Kaido wanted to be his subject. Without losing a second, Kaido knelt before him and swore to become the subject of Jing Chen. Our boy summoned the scroll again and began to ponder. He opened the scroll and using his finger Kaido began to write on it. If he broke this soul contract, he would be rejected by the heavenly Tao and with a single thought, Jing could take his life instantly. Once Kaido signed the soul contract, the scroll began to close. Jing's eyes started to shine with excitement, since with a single thought, no matter the distance, he could kill Kaido, so he asked him to follow the rules to the letter. With a gaze full of determination, Kaido clenched his fist and asked if Jing was planning to take Sakura. He was willing to serve him like a dog or a horse, to risk his life without hesitation, even if it meant facing his allies. With a confused expression, Jing closed his eyes and coughed. Deep down he only wanted Kaido to be a spy inside Sakura. Thinking calmly, he remembered that admiration for the strong had always been an ancient tradition in the country of Sakura. The barrier created by the knight's skill shattered into pieces like glass and began to disappear. With a curious gaze, Jing turned around and couldn't help but wonder if the demon from the underworld had been destroyed by heavenly Tao. Zheojia, who was transformed into a beetle, mentioned that because it had not been able to get out in 5 seconds, he had eaten the demon of the underworld. Far from feeling furious, Jing thought this was a good thing. Sedo was in shock upon seeing that Zheojia had eaten the demon of the underworld. Jing closed his eyes and coughed, asking Sedo not to ask questions. As little by little the barrier was disappearing. Sedo mentioned that now that the artifact had been destroyed, the barrier would collapse by itself. Jing asked Sedo to return to Sakura, giving him the order to organize and plan things well since he was going to give him the title of Great General in the future. Sedo nodded his head. While Wuji's eyes were shining with seriousness, he began to draw his sword. For him this was an unexpected outcome. Jing began to stare at him, realizing that his aura was very powerful. Once the smoke curtain disappeared, Wuji asked if he was Jing. With a sincere gaze, Jing nodded his head. Wuji realized that the man behind our boy was Sedo, the first on the list of assassins. He was confused to see that Sedo had knelt before Jing and asked if he was trying to launch a surprise attack. Jing revealed that Sedo was now his subordinate. Jing began to walk toward him and demanded to know who he was. Wuji crossed his arms and introduced himself as Famyun Wuji, the leader of Grand Zia's genius list in its 781st edition. The people who were with him had also been part of the top 3 in past editions. Jing had to go with them to represent Grand Zia in the competition against the 3 overseas islands. With a furious gaze, Nan Gongyan asked Ding Chenku if this was the way weirdos communicated. Ding Chenku's eyes filled with confusion. He couldn't believe that Jing was out of danger. And Wuji believed everything he said. He extended his hand and explained that asking questions was a form of observation. According to Nan Gongyan, it was a miracle that Ding Chenku had managed to survive so many years in the caves. Upon hearing this, he felt furious since he didn't know why she wanted to challenge him all the time. Jing and Wuji began staring at each other intently, and their bodies began to emit an intense energy. For the others this was uncomfortable, and they didn't know whether to. Nan Gongyan explained that both of them were silently admiring each other. For Chenku, the 9 miasma wings were more powerful than they had imagined. Jing extended his hand and praised Wuji for being strong, as his sword had made a good impression on him. With a serious gaze, Wuji made it clear that he was a 6th transformation warrior. And Jing only 3, but he wasn't sure if he could win if he fought UGHT against Jing. For him, it was not surprising that the god Jing Wu was training him as his successor. He revealed that in the competition against the 3 foreign islands, it was possible that Jing could not use his 9 miasma wings, so he asked him to be careful, with eyes shining with determination. He struck his fist against his chest and made it clear that when the time came, he would protect Jing with everything, since this was the promise he had made to god Jing Wu. Chenku approached them and reported that nightfall was approaching. He advised returning to the main base of the city, since there they would have plenty of time to talk. Jing turned towards Sedo and with a serene gaze asked him to return to Sakura and follow through with the plan as intended. Sedo placed his hand on his chest and bowed his head before him. Jing and the others turned their backs on him and began walking away. With a relieved gaze, Sedo let out a sigh. According to him, Wuji was ignorant for thinking that Jing was only strong because of having the 9 miasma wings. Jing began to walk. Wuji was 29 years old and was at the peak of the 6 transformations. Jing didn't know if he would have been able to win this battle without the insect system. If in the Great Tiananmen tournament there was a section that limited all extreme power, without the insects and with only his own power, he didn't know if he would have any chance. He appeared in his sea of consciousness and began to observe Zeo-chan carefully. There were still more than 2 months left. He had to raise his skill from level 1 to level 3 and remembered that the ancestral tree had given another fruit. Last time the fruit had allowed him to obtain divinity and activate his skill, paving the way towards 10 transformations. Zeo-chan transformed into a human and began descending toward Jing. Our boy's eyes filled with curiosity. He didn't know what skill this time the fruit was going to give him. Jing picked up the fruit and began observing it closely, remembering that last time it had ripened thanks to the scattered souls Zeo-ji had collected on Q Jing's battlefield. He was confused seeing that this time it had ripened directly. Zeo-chan's eyes began to shine with surprise, and she mentioned that when Jing had taken Sedo as his subject, the ancestral tree had absorbed all the scattered souls on the battlefield, causing the fruit to ripen. Jing was in shock to see that the tree could collect souls by itself. Zeo-chan hugged Jing from behind. Our boy closed his eyes and activated the fruit, making it start to shine. The system reported that he had unlocked the functional fruit and had obtained a special item called Steel Faith Seal. It had as a requirement for activation, destroy its deity, break its spine, and ruin its civilization. This seal could be used on a race or a specific class of living beings and allowed engraving a burning mark of faith in the origin of their soul, creating an unbreakable devotion towards the bearer of this seal. Regardless of level, cycle of reincarnation, reincarnation itself or procreation, the mark of faith would always remain. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part,